All right, so we now have some sales numbers for Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green on Switch and Switch 2, and it's quite good. Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green sold 4 million copies at $20 a pop for these classic games for the Pokemon's 30th anniversary. That means they made $80 million in a month on these classic Game Boy Advance games for Pokemon's 30th anniversary. Now, to me, what I think the Pokemon Company and Nintendo should do is they should expand on this. They should obviously go, okay, we've made $80 million from this. And yeah, sure, these companies are worth hundreds of billions of dollars, but $80 million for a game that's 20 years old, that is a huge amount of sales, and that's a huge amount of money that they've brought in from this back catalogue sales. And personally, I think they should expand on that. I think they should do like Pokemon Emerald, Pokemon Gold, Pokemon Crystal sales, selling those ROMs on the eShop for like $20 each, whatever they're going to sell them for. Because to me, there's clearly a demand for these classic Pokemon games. If, you look at Pokemon in general, Pokemon is the widest successful franchise, the biggest in the world. Everyone knows Pokemon. Pokemon has some of the most iconic characters in the world as well. It makes sense that these classic Pokemon games should be re-released. It has shown that there's a demand for these games. These games obviously sold, $20 each, and, sold $80 million worth of games, which is 4 million copies in a month. These games have obviously since, grown. Obviously, there's a whole audience for Pokemon. Pokemon's audience was relatively quite young, but there's also a huge sort of diehard fandom for Pokemon, because you've got Pokemon cards, you've got Pokemon toys, all that sort of stuff. And really, it makes sense that the people who grew up playing Fire Red and Leaf Green are now like in their 30s and probably have kids of their own. So it makes sense that, Pokemon would re-release more classic games. Now, sure, you can argue that they should just put them on Nintendo Switch Online and done the whole GameCube thing or Game Boy Advance app, whatever. But I don't think that Pokemon was ever going to come to those apps. I think that they was always going to keep them separate because obviously how popular Pokemon is, and they knew that they could always resell those games. Now, personally, I am happy that we are seeing these numbers, and I'm hoping that we see Nintendo and Pokemon Company do more with the older games, because I feel like putting the other games on the eShop, like Crystal, like Emerald, for example, because Emerald especially is one that's really in demand. People really want to play Emerald again, but they won't re-release it, and obviously the cartridge is like $300, and let's be honest, that $80 million that the Pokemon Company and Nintendo made from these games, I would rather them make the money because they made the games, rather than give it to a reseller who obviously is trying to sell these games like $100, $200, $300, and their whole argument is, this is vintage, this is a vintage cartridge, and it's like, well, I don't even know if it works or whatever. And really, it'd just be kind of nice if we saw more classic Pokemon games get re-released on modern systems. I feel like that would be a huge benefit to, but not only fans of the games, obviously it could introduce these games to new fans as well, but also to Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, which should obviously be able to increase the sales of these games. They'd be able to show like, hey, Pokemon's lifetime sales is this, with obviously showing case obviously more classic games obviously doing really well. Obviously, the 3DS had a load of Pokemon games re-released on there as well, and they sold pretty well on there. So it does make sense that they would obviously re-release more Pokemon games, especially after seeing how successful Fire Red and Leaf Green were. Because Fire Red and Leaf Green was definitely a weird pick, in my opinion, for like Pokemon games to re-release, because these were remakes of Game Boy games. But I do think it's kind of cool to see that these games have been widely successful. Obviously, the 4 million sales they've done was really good, and I'm hoping that we now see obviously more classic Pokemon games get re-released on Switch 2 and Switch 1 on the eShop. But let me know what you guys think. Are you guys a fan of these games? Are you guys happy to hear that these games have been successful? And because they've been successful, we just got to ask the question, could we see more? Could we see more, classic Pokemon games get added to Switch and Switch 2 eShops? I know Pokemon's 30th anniversary is kind of over now. They've done the celebrations, it's kind of done. But I do think it'd be kind of cool to see the Pokemon Company do some more re-releases of some more classic Pokemon. Like I said, Pokemon Emerald, Pokemon Crystal, Pokemon Gold, Silver, Ruby, Sapphire. Maybe some of the spin-offs as well, because I don't think Switch Online is going to get all the classic Pokemon games. I think Switch Online will probably get like the spin-offs, and that's basically all they'll get. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys agree with me? Do you guys disagree with me? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you're new, make sure you subscribe, you like, you follow, all that sort of stuff. I've been EC, and I'm signing out. Peace.